Okay, today we are going to look at the final unit under the module 1, the audit risks. And what is audit risk? Audit risk is the term that is used to express the view that the auditor may express an invalid opinion or draw a wrong conclusion from his audit work due to lack of experience or lack of his total understanding about the client's business. You know, generally what we...
Okay, ma, I can't hear you.
So every work is there's an auditor being a human being. Audit risk can also, it can come up, it might not only be the auditor's maybe lack of proper understanding. It can also be a risk that is inherent, that is within the organization because of the environment the organization is operating. The risk can also come from the management staff. It can come from it can be associated with the management staff because probably the staff there don't have the skill to prepare the financial statements. So these are some risks that the auditor might be involved in. The risks that might come up in the course of discharging his audit assignment. So the auditor should plan at the early stage the level of the risks that he might tolerate. There are certain level of risks that is acceptable in every audit work, but the auditor is supposed to define it at the beginning of the audit assignment. That is at the planning stage. He's supposed to define or state the level of risk he will accept. At the planning stage, the auditor should assess the risk of material errors or misstatements in the following areas. He should assess the risks associated with the financial statements as a whole and the risks in each of the component items in the financial statement. From there, this assessment will now help him to know the level of risks he will now accept. And once he states as in cuts goes beyond, goes above the level of risk acceptable, he will start afresh. He will start to conduct a better test in order to reduce the level of the risk, the percentage level of the risk. So this particular unit is not so vast. Let us quickly look at the risk environment. Let's look at the risk environment. The risk environment, you can look at it from the angle of business environment, the control environment. Under the business environment, you look at the nature of the business. Whether the business, for instance, if it is a business that collects cash on a regular basis, the risk of misappropriation of cash will be higher than a business that doesn't collect cash on a daily basis. I understand what I hope you can understand what I mean here. Because if you manage cash on a daily basis, there is this high risk of one involving in teaming and lading. Okay? So under the business environment, there's also, you look at the circumstances which may exert undue influence on management, such as holding of shares or options by management. Under the business environment, you look at the transactions with the related party and accounting methods they have adopted. What of the management integrity and the company performance? For example, deliberate distortion of financial statement to meet profit forecasts, as in those of them that will involve in creative accounting or window dressing in order to hike their profits so that people will come and invest. So these are the things you consider under the risk environment, under business environment. Then under the control environment, you look at the competence of the control personnel, the internal control system in operation within the organization. Is it functional? Is it uh, is it for, what is the degree of the functionability of the business of the internal control? Because in internal control, once it's functional, then it means the risks will be reduced drastically. But if the internal control is not functioning very well, my dear, the auditor should be very, very skeptical, very, very careful, because it means that the risks the risks of the internal control not complying, as in when he carries out his compliance test, the risks will be very, very high. Then he will also consider the recruitment and the training of staffs. Is the staff, are they always trained, or are they redundant for so many years? The management overall control, the unusual transactions, the excessive authority vested in a senior staff, as in who says it all. Is there any excess power the person is is uh, is utilizing, or rather bringing up? He does things the way he wants to do it and things like that. So these are the things that the auditor will consider. And in reaching this decision as to the areas to be tested and the number of balances and transactions to be examined, the auditor will need to consider information available from previous experience, and his knowledge of the client's operations will come in now. Whether he has enough knowledge of the client's operations, of the client's business. That is why we said at the beginning of this lecture, or the beginning of this course, that it is always good for auditor to understand the environment and understand the business of the client he's about to audit. It will help him a lot in taking decisions and even in expressing his opinion. More specifically, the procedure adopted by the auditor for the purpose of detecting material errors and irregularities in conducting an audit will depend on his judgment as to the extent of directly relevant legislation, the relative effectiveness of different audit tests, the risks that a particular type of irregularity or error or breach of directly relevant legislation could impair the truth and the fairness of the financial statement, and the risks that such irregularity can occur and remain undetected in the company. What are we trying to say here? Everything that he will do about on risks depends on his judgment, it depends on his knowledge, depends on his experience, his previous experience, and the knowledge of the client's business, the operation of the client. So let us look at let me say the types of risks we expect in audit assignment. Number one is what we call inherent risks. And this inherent risk is one that is derived from the characteristics of the client's business. When you say something is inherent, it means that it is natural. It means that there's no amount of tests you can conduct or you can carry that will remove it. It is somehow inbuilt, integrated. It is part of the business. Let me just put it that way. And I think that is major reason why the auditor must definitely, before the audit assignment takes off proper, he should state the level of the risks he will accept. That's why we are providing for it, because there are some risks that are inherent, that are part of the business. So those ones, you cannot eliminate them. It is with them, it is in tandem, or what I may call. It is in the business, and you can, no amount of knowledge or whatever, professionalism can remove the risk. So you rather provide certain level for it to cover it. Okay? So the next one, and that risk, inherent risk, is derived from the type of business. Okay, I think I've said that one. Is the type of business the client is in, the industry he finds himself. It is related to that industry. so you cannot remove it. So another one is the control risks. The control risk is the internal, this is the risk that the internal control system may not prevent or detect material statements or errors. You see, there's something we say that the internal control sometimes might not be so, might be, okay, let me say, might be very, very functional. But there are some people that will still beat it. It happens everywhere. You try to lock your tank, you try to lock your house, you try to do everything, but some people will still break into your house. So that is what we are talking about. You know, what we are talking about is that the control risk is the risk that the internal control might fail to detect or prevent the material misstatements. That is, no matter what, however the internal control is functional, there might still be risks. For instance, the internal control might be very, very functional, but the management override might not allow. You know, if a client is definitely have an effect on your audit report, you have set your internal control. Some staff are overriding it. They will tell you, do it this way, do it this way. So there are some risks associated with the internal control. There are certain things that to detect or prevent certain anomalous risks. Then we look at the detection risk, which is the third one. Detection risk is a risk that the substantive test, which I told you in the previous lecture, that's the last test that auditor conducts before expressing his opinion. So this detection risk is a risk that that substantive text may fail, or the auditor's substantive test and procedures and his opinion on the financial statement may not detect material misstatement or errors, human error. He might conduct the test, but the test might fail to detect the. Please note the differences between these three types of audit risk, because you might see it somewhere. So the auditor will usually consider that an overall risk about 5%. He might provide for the risks, and of course, when he's carrying out his test, he will know if the test um, comes out with a low percentage of risk, which is below the one he has provided, then he will accept it. He will accept the risk like that and express his opinion like that. Of course, in his report, he will state the level of risks that he has provided for. But if it is above it, he will do everything humanly possible to reduce it to the previous or the original risks level he has provided for. That is to say, if he has provided for 5%, for instance, or 10%, that the risks associated with his work should not go above the 5% or go above 10%. And at the end of his work, the risks percentage is about 12. He will not make a statement, he will not express his opinion. He will go back to make sure that the risks will not go above the percentage he has provided for. There's an example in your book, in your material. You can read it, you can understand it more from there. Then if the audit risk turns out to be unacceptable, then the auditor has to plan and execute further substantive talk. I've said that one. However, the auditor may still need to perform additional audit work where he is put on inquiry if the audit risk level is perceived acceptable. In assessing the level of audit risk of a company, the auditor should bear the following factors in mind. For instance, under inherent risks, you want to assess the level of audit risks associated with the inherent risks in the company. You look at the company's performance and profitability. You should also look at the nature of the business, its services. You should look at the financial stability of the company at the present time and the future, the incidence of related party and unusual transaction. Please, you have to read all these things up. They are not very difficult to understand. So that by next class we take up the module 2. You also look at the likelihood that the error could have a material effect upon the financial statement. And I don't know whether you understand what I mean by material misstatement. I could have explained. Material misstatement is that misstatement, the information when it is excluded in any financial statement, the investor will be will be uh, will be denied, or rather will not we feel that he has made a mistake. I'm just trying to explain it in my own word. Material misstatement, an information is information that if it is not included, the investor will be misled. That is what we call material misstatement. But when you state it, he will not be misled. But if it is omitted, he will be misled. That is what we call material misstatement. Assuming you're supposed to state that they have a court case, which might turn out against them, and you did not state it, and an investor relies on the audited financial statement and invests, and at the long run, the case was against them, and the company was become bankrupt or goes into distress. The auditor that audited that company within that period will be held responsible, because you're supposed to make that statement. It is a material statement. Supposed to state it so that if the investor, if he wants, he should invest. If he don't like, he should leave it. But not when it is not stated. That's not when the investor doesn't know whether they are in court case or not. You'll be held liable, because this is a material misstatement. Or you said something that's supposed to be false. You now told it become it's now a reality. For instance, they didn't make profit, they made loss, and you stated that they made profit. It is a material misstatement. It is a material misstatement, because if you have stated that they made loss, some investors might not might not invest in that client's business. But because you did not state it, they invested, and they got their investment got uh, the investment was not wasn't okay, as in they didn't get what they expected from the company. Then you'll be held liable for it. You go in for it. So under the control risk, what the auditor should look at while checking the level of the risks in the company, you look at the strength and the quality and effectiveness of its management. You also look at whether the company has an effective internal audit department. Of course, you look at the internal control of the company and the competence of the accounting personnel and all that. So even under the detection risk, you also look at the recruitment procedure of the audit firm. I think there's a place I've said all this. So with this, I think we have ended the module 1. This one is the last unit in module 1. So I've ended it, and by next class, we start off with the module 2. Thank you.